Hey everyone, welcome back to the It's a Mind Game podcast. My name is Jade, and today it's just you and I. A really interesting conversation popped up with some of our HA community members, and I just felt really called to share the conversation with you. And it come on the basis of our eating disorder and how it's taking away from our life. And I think this is a really important conversation to have, and it's something to air out in times of struggle or in times when you're contemplating whether recovery is even for you. And that is because our eating disorders give us this incredible false sense of security. And for many of you listening, when I say you kind of feel like you're in a relationship with your eating disorder, you'll know exactly what I mean. And it's this really interesting dynamic where even though you know your eating disorder is making you physically and mentally sick, it also allows you to feel safe. It allows you to feel like there's something predictable in your life. Perhaps the discipline of your disordered behaviors give you self-worth, or perhaps the shape of your body right now makes you feel special when perhaps you're the smallest person in the room or you're the most athletic looking in the room. And all of these things together can almost make our eating disorder feel like a big warm hug, right? And some of you, I'm sure, are listening going, yeah, it's exactly what it feels like. So therefore, when it comes to witnessing that it's having such a big effect on our physical and mental health, there can be such a contrast in emotions, because part of you is like, but my eating disorder allows me to feel safe and in control. And it's the only thing that kind of gives me like a grasp on life. Like it's the one variable I don't need to worry about. My job's stressful, perhaps my family dynamic is stressful. There's all these other things going on. And my eating disorder is just the one thing I don't need to worry about. I just eat what I eat, I do what I do. And there's traits about it that are really, really appealing to me, and some of which I don't want to let go of. And when you're in that thought process, it's important to then flip the switch and start to witness what it is your eating disorder is taking away from you. Because if you look at the things that you feel it's giving you, i.e., that false sense of security or safety or comfort or the thing that makes you feel special, it's very difficult to break up with that, right? Because they seem so positive and they seem like really valuable things to have in your life. But when we start to take a different perspective and look at the things your eating disorder is taking away from your life, you can start to see it's quite a nasty relationship that you're in. And while it presents itself one way, it's really working in a different way. What I mean by that is, how many times have you perhaps missed out on wholeheartedly enjoying a social event because you were freaked out about what to eat, when to eat, how to eat, that you had this almost false facade of laughing and talking to people and putting on this happy smiley face, but the banter in the back of your head is, what do I eat? What do I do? Should I have this? Should I not have it? What if I just have it this one time? Oh my gosh, I couldn't go near it. And it's this constant chatter that can get really, really noisy. Sometimes it could even be a paranoia of, has anyone noticed that I haven't eaten? Or perhaps if you do eat something, oh, does everybody think I eat that all the time? Or there's so much chatter that can come alongside those disordered behaviors and thoughts. And if you think about when you're in a social experience and all those thoughts are going on, it's next to impossible to offer the people that you're with your full self, because you're so occupied with the things that are going on in your head that you can't possibly be there for them in the full capacity, and you can't even enjoy the experience for yourself in a full capacity because you're so distracted. Another thing you could think about is perhaps the build up to a social event, or perhaps an outing where, rather than days in advance being like, oh my gosh, I can't wait for that catch up, days in advance you're thinking about how your training can compensate for what you will or won't eat. Or perhaps you're researching the menu to find the lowest calorie option. Perhaps you've RSVP'd yes, and you're sitting there pondering excuses for why last minute you can't go because there's no way you can give yourself permission to do it, right? And if you think about your eating disorder from those perspectives, the security you think it gives you is actually ridding or taking away from your social life. It's taking away from your connection with other humans and that sense of love and care and joy, really, that we get from different social experiences that so happen to be focused around or include food. And when you can start to look at it from that perspective, it starts to open up our eyes to what is being taken away from us. Because imagine if we're looking at the social event side of things, if you could just get invited somewhere, show up, enjoy yourself, go home, and that's the end of the chapter, and you just move on, how much more enjoyable would that be versus trying to predict everything and pre-calculate what's going to happen or how you're going to compensate for things? It can be really, really tricky. And when you're in it, you often don't think it's that bad because you're kind of used to it by now. But if you can try and take the perspective of, imagine if I could just say yes, and that's it. There's no other questions. There's no other worst case scenarios or best case scenarios. It's just a yes. How nice would that be? And how would that affect your ability to show up and be present and really enjoy the energy of the room or the conversations of the room, or even just having confidence with being there? Another thing your eating disorder is taking away from you, for some anyway, is your menstrual cycle. It's your period. It's taking away from a biological response that is meant to happen. And for many of you who want to have children, your eating disorder is taking away your ability to have children. And when you think of it from that perspective, once again, why would you want to be in a relationship with something that's taking away your capacity to have children? And I know that sounds really harsh, and I don't mean to hurt anybody's feelings by saying it so direct and straightforward, but again, just reconsolidating that our eating disorder can trick us into feeling like it's got our back. It's helping us to feel safe. It's helping us to feel successful in life and make us feel like we're actually doing a really good job, or perhaps people respect us more, or, all kinds of things. As I'm saying this, different things will pop up for you, and that's okay. But what is that worth if it's taking away something that you truly desire in your life, which could be to be a mother? Is that relationship worth the false sense of security it gives you if it means sacrificing something such as becoming a mum? And even if you're listening to this and you don't want to be a mum, that's totally cool. But, not having a menstrual cycle takes away from our health. And for many of us who are on this journey, we got here because we wanted to lead a healthy life, right? It always starts with good intentions. And now we're here. And if you think about the way you want to age or the way you want to be when you're 80, 90, or gosh, hopefully even 100 years old, can the life you're living really make that happen? Or are your eating disorder behaviors leading you to a place where you're not going to age well and your body's not going to cope well as you go on? And if that's the case, once again, is your relationship with your eating disorder worth it? And I want you to know it's okay if some of you are listening to this and you kind of feel like your guard's up, because a lot of the time when these kind of conversations come up and you're not quite ready for it, you'll want to defend that relationship. You'll want to defend what your eating disorder has to offer you because that feels safer. That's what you know better than anything else. So if you are feeling that way, I want you to know it's okay. But I'm really glad you're still here listening to what I've got to say about this. And that's really, really important, because perhaps something will kind of stick and it'll allow you to ponder on it for a little while, and it could lead you to a better situation on your thoughts when it comes to your eating disorder and what it means to you, not only now, but in your future. And another thing for your consideration when thinking about your eating disorder and what it means to you is, if you did actually look at it as a physical being, all right, imagine if it was actually your boyfriend or your girlfriend or, your roommate, and they were a physical person bossing you around. Imagine if this person would tell you what you can and can't eat. Imagine if this person would tell you to ignore your hunger, or perhaps ignore your satiety, or perhaps say no to you going out when you really want to, or perhaps tell you to go do excessive amounts of exercise to compensate for what you had eaten. Or perhaps they boss you into doing like binging or purging or laxatives to compensate for something that you had eaten that you shouldn't have. If that was an actual person treating you that way rather than a voice in your head, would you tolerate it? And if you wouldn't tolerate it, what makes it okay that the voice in your head can get away with it and not a real physical being? Because when you think about it, the voice in our head probably has more power than the person as a physical being, right? Because the voice in our head, it can trick us into thinking, well, this is me saying it. This is exactly what I want. But is it exactly what you want? All right. And that can be kind of complicated too, because perhaps you do want your body to stay physically the same, but you don't want what it takes to maintain the body, right? That's a really important thing to think about, because really, if you think about, again, looking at your eating disorder as being in a relationship with someone, I think there's that saying, if there's something you love, set it free and it'll come back, or I don't know, you'll know what I'm talking about. But imagine if you set your eating disorder free, right? And you lived without it for 6 months and you're able to go to social events and enjoy them. You're able to show up with confidence. You're able to make decisions around food that felt effortless, right? It was a simple yes or a simple no. You didn't have constant advice or constantly being told what you should or shouldn't eat or how much you should or eat. It was just simply choosing what you want when you want it, and that's it. If you lived that way for, let's say, 6 months, would you want the disorder to come back into your life and be in a relationship with it again? Or once you kicked it to the curb, would you be so happy that it's gone? Right? And I know recovering from an eating disorder is more complicated than that, but it's really important to witness that if your eating disorder was a physical being, what you would and wouldn't tolerate. And for most of us, we wouldn't tolerate anybody treating us that way, right? And for those of you listening who have recovered from your eating disorder, or you're starting to put steps in motion and you're starting to feel those little moments of liberation where you do feel kind of free, or you do feel in charge again, right? You're not being dictated by the voice. You know how good that feels, right? Because it does. It feels really, really good. And if you had that all the time, I bet you wouldn't want that eating disorder to come back. You wouldn't want that relationship to come back. So I'm going to leave this episode here, and I just hope that it's given you a few things to ponder, right? Just the concept of how your eating disorder kind of makes you think it's a good thing for you versus what your eating disorder is actually taking away from you or depriving you of. And also that idea that if it was a physical being, that you probably wouldn't tolerate it. You wouldn't put up with it. And just because it's in your mind, it doesn't mean that you should. So anyway, I would love to know if this episode resonated with you, if it brought up something to the surface for you to think about, or perhaps it made you think about things in a way that you hadn't previously thought about it. My DM is always open on Instagram and Facebook. You're welcome to send me an email. And as always, coaching is always available if you're looking to break up with your eating disorder and get your period back. But thank you so much for listening. If you could subscribe or share this podcast with someone who would really enjoy it too, I'd greatly appreciate that. But bye for now, and thanks so much for being here.